So we just got some massive news with regards to Dune Awakening's endgame. We just received an official message from the creative director about PvE and PvP. Again, mainly acknowledging and addressing the comments around the endgame of Dune Awakening. They do want PvE players to be able to play the endgame and have access to the content of the endgame. Their goal is not to force PvE players to interact with the PvP system that they may have no interest in. However, they still believe in the core concept of the Deep Desert, an endlessly renewing location that resets every week and creates an activity loop for great rewards. That tension heading out there, head on a swivel, eyes peeled for foes as you enter the most dangerous part of the planet in the universe. However, as he puts it, wish in one hand, shit in the other, and see which one fills up first. One of my hands is overflowing right now and it's sadly not wishes. Therefore, they will be changing the Deep Desert. Some areas will now be flagged as partial warfare PvE, while the Deep Desert parts of the Deep Desert will remain as they currently are, high reward, high risk areas. He points out that the reality is that players are reporting being cut out of endgame due to an extremely competitive nature of the Deep Desert. So, starting soon, we will be getting some areas of the Deep Desert as PvE areas. So we'll be able to have testing stations and be able to harvest tier 6 resources without the threat of conflict we may not want with other players. However, it's important to note that the top tier of the game is balanced around guilds and groups, and so solo players will still find it a bit grindy. The Landsraad control points and shipwrecks with the larger spice fields will still remain within the region of the Deep Desert that is PvP flagged. So all of that, yes, pretty much confirms that they acknowledge what the community wants. Again, there was a pretty big outcry with regards to the endgame of Dune Awakening requiring you to play PvP content. You literally can't get Stravidium or Titanium without going into a PvP zone. It's literally a requirement, unless of course you want to buy it from other players, which for me just completely cuts the point of the whole game. Why would I just go and grind the same old content to get Solari to buy resources from other players? For me, that's just defeating the point of the game. Now, I did manage to get Stravidium, Titanium, and be able to farm this material. However, over this past week or so, I've had to come in and play at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. So there's barely any players. So I didn't run into many, and I would still run into players at these outrageous times. But yes, you had absolutely no hope running in here at peak hours because there was just so many players and the Deep Desert would just be dominated by groups of players, again, like guilds and things. And that's kind of the intent. But their vision is not that PvP should be one-sided. Like, if both people want to fight, that's when it should be PvP. Therefore, they will be making changes. PvP itself has plenty of issues that need to be addressed, and we're taking steps in that direction with our first changes to the Scout Ornithopters. We've seen most of this already, but good to get confirmation again. After the AMA, Scout Ornithopters with rocket launchers attached will have their speed maneuverability reduced. Rockets fired from Scout Ornithopters will have increased heat generation, so they can't spam as much. And thrusters will now provide a max speed bonus regardless of wings, ensuring that scouts with thrusters will be the fastest vehicles in the game. And a new Tier 5 infantry rocket launcher will be added to improve the dynamic of vehicle ground combat. Right now, the only rocket launcher available is Tier 6 requiring plastinium. So it may help to have one that requires just duraluminum, and so you can be prepared going into the Deep Desert and have at least a bit of offensive capabilities. For example, I could be running my Ornithopter with storage, not rockets, and then I could immediately land and use my rocket launcher to attack my enemy. Of course, I might just get blown up by the enemy with their rockets. However, they would simply be adding a PvE area for the Deep Desert, so you can simply go there if you literally do not want to partake in PvP at all. You do not want that threat of somebody jumping you. You can successfully get your tier 6 resources like titanium and stravidium without that threat of conflict. They do also state here there will be additional changes to respawn timers, vehicle storage tools, hand scanners, and other mechanics that they see being abused in the deep desert. That probably means you won't be able to store your vehicle so easily when in a PvP zone. I can't do so right now as there's stuff in the inventory, but you get the point. Some people could just immediately land if you're getting attacked and store your vehicle. I liked that if you wanted to get out of a fight quick, but it also was a thing that people could abuse where if you're losing the fight, you can quickly dip and just, store your vehicle and basically take no consequences. And it was mostly players who had rockets who could do that, as they didn't have storage, so they could easily put it away. Of course, you could run thrusters, but then, yes, you can barely carry any materials. They do state here the intended dynamic of deep desert PvP in Dune Awakening is that unless you really mess up, you should always have the option to retreat with whatever you managed to claim so far. And if you're smart and vigilant, you never have to fight if you don't want to. If you run, you'll have to call a halt to whatever task you're pursuing, but it should always be a choice. PvP should happen when both parties decide they want to fight over a location. And it's exactly that I was pushing towards for the deep desert. Like, again, a solo player who doesn't want to actively fight in PvP, who doesn't even have the equipment to fight in PvP, should not be forced to do so. Therefore, anybody who wants to get away should have the ability to do so. Therefore, if players run rockets who are going to be the people who attack you, should have that speed reduction. And they have already said on the scout they will be reducing max maneuverability. I believe that will just be maneuverability, so you still have the same top speed as somebody who's running storage. But again, this all becomes pretty much moot now that you should have a PvE area where you can get all the top tier endgame resources without again having to bother with any of that conflict between players. I guess they will see heat maps and they will see how many people actually partake in the PvP zone now versus the PvE zone and see what happens there. Also, you PvP players may not be able to get some free kills, griefing players who simply just want some resources and hunting them down and killing them. Again, I always believe PvP should be a consensual thing. You should agree upon it. Of course, you can state entering a PvP zone is you agreeing to the fact that you can get destroyed and put down at any moment. But again, when you see the devs saying that PvP should be an optional thing and you should be able to get out of a fight when you don't want to fight, that gives us the message that you should be able to get away, that PvP should not always be forced upon you. And so it felt like you should have the option to not engage in PvP if you didn't want to. Imagine there was a flagging system where you could enter the deep desert and flag for PvP if you wanted to. How many people would actually flag for PvP? I guess not that many. And that's how many players you will see actually want to PvP versus players who simply just want to get some resources. I think the majority of players don't actually want to play PvP in this game. It's not something they find fun. They just want to get their tier 6 resources and complete the game. But moving on with the developer post, he states here there will be some changes coming to, say, Landsraad. It's supposed to be an activity driver that's designed to promote conflict between factions, providing goal thresholds for individuals and groups to work towards something like a personal reward. The Landsraad should be doing that for everybody who wants to participate in the endgame, be that PvE or PvP players, and it should be giving things out to do every week. The unfortunate thing is, if people complete these really quick, then that's it. You can no longer get any rewards. So I believe they will be changing this. The activities that the Landsraad asks you to do will become more varied as we flesh out the world with more content and activities. What form will those activities take? There'll be more dungeons with bosses that drop endgame loot, more contracts that require specific tasks to be undertaken, more specialized delivery tasks including components that cannot be stockpiled, and if they ever add raids to the game, there will be a task in the Landsraad to complete those raids. It is a framework that holds the endgame activities in place. So good to see they will be improving it. They'll be addressing some key flaws, the inability to hand in items after a square is completed, and the rapidity at which some squares are turned in. Stockpiling is currently rewarded, but that is not their intention for the system, so they'll be making some changes to address it as best they can. Landsraad rewards are supposed to reflect the endgame tiers of progression. This includes vendors, which can be unlocked for the entire faction. This is the intention, but once again, he acknowledges this isn't exactly in the right place. The Landsraad will be updated to provide more micro rewards for solo and small players. And ultimately, thanks for listening, and they apologize for the confusion. So again, this confirms some news we've had already from the AMA with regards to changes to the Scout Ornithopter, and now also confirms we'll be getting a dedicated PvE area in the Deep Desert, where you'll be able to get all the top tier resources and won't be hard limited to having to go to a PvP zone if you want to actively farm those materials. A great thing, and again, it will show the devs how many people are actually interested in PvP and how many just want some chill PvE. It is quite a big contrast going from the Haga Basin map, where it's pretty chill, you do what you want, you mind your own business, you only run into other players when they say build bases or clear out some outposts, which can be a nice thing sometimes. If you didn't want to kill everything and you just wanted to loot anyway, then you can go there and it's already cleared out. I don't see that as such a bad thing. Other people do complain that maybe they should be instance based, and that way you do have to kill the enemies every single time. But the game seems designed on the fact you can go back to certain locations and you can get the chests again after a certain period of time. So there's that repetitiveness, and when that repetitiveness gets broken up by somebody who's already there fighting the enemies, you can join them, help kill them, or it's simply all cleared out already. I don't see that as a big deal. And again, going to the Deep Desert to get those maxed out resources, Stravidia and Titanium, now should be a bit easier, as there will be a strict PvE area that you can do that in. It will still be a little bit grindy because I'm sure there won't be so many of those nodes, and they'll probably be a lot more contested, as again, a lot more players probably want to be just chill playing PvE versus PvP. So you might get people waiting on the respawns of those nodes. So overall, I hope this breakdown was somewhat insightful, clears it up for you. A massive thank you to all my channel members for your extra support. Thank you for watching. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. If this was somewhat insightful, consider leaving the video a like. I want to see you guys around. Goodbye for now.